by introducing yourself and your relationship with SAQA and a little bit about about Strata in this amazing exhibit.
I'm Yvonne Porcella, and I was born and raised in California. I started out my career as a wife and a mother. I have 4 children, 4.5 years from the oldest to the youngest, and I called them the wave. In fact, there's a wonderful piece in the exhibit called Water, and that's what I felt about my children. They came in my life, they were a giant wave, and they all went out at the same time. And I didn't lose children, I gained a bathroom, which I immediately turned into a shrine. And I had people come and ring my doorbell and say, "Can we come and see your shrine?" Which was quite an interesting part of my life. I attended Quilt National as juror, and afterwards I went to visit a dealer I had. I should back up by saying in 1985, 5 artists got together and we organized an exhibition called 5 Artist Quilts that hung at the San Francisco Arts Commission in San Francisco. And it then traveled to Macon, Georgia. And a woman in Atlanta saw the article in the paper and said, "Oh, I have a gallery, I'm gonna go down and see what this art stuff's all about, art quilt." And she called me on the phone and she said, "Would you be one of my artists in my gallery?" So we had this wonderful, wonderful relationship. We still do, even though Martha has passed. And she said to me one day when I was visiting her, she said, "You know, I have a gallery. I can't sell your work unless I can show my customers what's the best and give them a choice." So she said, "I want to carry about 5 or 6 art quilt makers." And so, and she said, "Would you start a national organization?" Because she said, wood turners started a national organization, glass makers have a national organization, and collectors say, "I need a Sam Maloof, I need a such and such and such and such." And so she would provide the artwork for her collectors. So I said, "Well, sure, you know, I've organized conferences. I organized a conference in 1972 for 1,500 people, and you know, it was a piece of cake. It was easy to do. I'm an operating room nurse by training, and everything's in order. You know, you start with a certain number of things, and you end with a certain number of things, and you have to be highly organized. And that's the way I run my life. My studio is immaculate. Everything in its place. I clean up after each piece. I don't have any unfinished projects because you never leave a patient unfinished on the operating room table. So I think that helped me very much in my career. So I managed to, God knows why, I started the wearable art movement because I wanted to make my own clothing. So I learned how to weave. I taught myself how to weave. And then I thought, well, I went to an exhibit and saw this beautiful piece called Bedding in Kimono Form. And I thought, I've never made a quilt, but maybe I could make a quilt into a garment and use quilting techniques. So I thought, well, maybe I'll make a quilt. And all I knew how to do was cut a strip with a pair of scissors, which I did. And I cut 72 inches wide by 82 inches long, and I laid them on the floor in my studio, and I kept rearranging the strips. And I went, this looks pretty good. And I started sewing it together, and it's now owned by the Smithsonian. It traveled to a number of places in the 80s, and the Smithsonian purchased it. So all these things happen, and I don't know why, but not only did the Smithsonian purchase it, but they also put it on a national tour. And so it was my quilt, an 150-year-old quilt, and Pablo Picasso, Mary Cassatt, Rodin's Walking Man, everything you can imagine, 300 objects from the Smithsonian. And my son said to me, "Rodin, my mother." Rodin, my mother. I said, "Honey, it's not your mother anymore. It's an object." And I said, it's not a quilt, it's an object. So, as I said, it's been a wonderful journey, and I absolutely adore the opportunity to see the new creative work that's being done. Because that was the whole point of our art quilt, was that it was no longer a utilitarian piece made for the bed, but rather seen as an art piece on the wall of a gallery. And I think that in 1981, I wrote an article for Quilters Newsletter magazine, and I said, are quilters ready to paint silk? And I had collected textiles, which, by the way, the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles is the repository for my collection of ethnic textiles. I had over 125 objects collected by never leaving my living room. But I learned, that's how I learned. I learned color and design from other people's handwork and from other people's primitive work who didn't have the opportunity to have sewing machine or high-intensity lamps. So the opportunity to judge Strata was a gift, because the prospectus and to see the development in 26 years of how this quilt genre has taken off and how it has satisfied the creative needs of so many men and women is very, very gratifying. So the opportunity to sit in front of my computer and to look at the work and to read the prospectus and to understand that this was about layering and about different techniques, about different materials, about mixing materials. Size is not an object, but rather the creativity of the individual was quite a joy. And I would, as I say in the essay in the catalog, I would go to bed at night and I'd think about a piece, and the next morning I'd get up, turn on my computer, and there it would be, and I'd say, oh, hello. I remember you from last night. So it is a wonderful gift for me to be able to not necessarily judge your work, but to select it for an exhibition such as this, and to see how SAQA has, when we started, my goal was to have regions so that we could divide ourselves up in the United States. We had regions. We had a quarter of the United States, a quarter of the United States, and a quarter of the United States. And so now the fact that we have these regional groups that can take on their own exhibition history, their own development, their own education, and I think that it was my goal originally. I had two goals. One was to document what was happening in the art quilt movement, to document who were the movers and shakers, to change the term from, oh yes, I make quilts, as you're sitting on an airplane and the guy says, oh, my grandmother makes placemats. My goal was to change the terminology so that when you said I make an art quilt, people immediately had a vision in their mind that this was something special. So that was one goal. The second goal was to educate the artists themselves about professionalism, how to make a portfolio, how to present your work, not to fold it up and put it in a banana box you got from the grocery store, but to ship it like it was precious. I spent $2,500 shipping a piece to Poland one time because I wanted it to go in a crate. I had the crate made, had a carnet, had a customs broker, etc. And I called a friend of mine, a very famous woman artist who's recently passed away, and I said, it cost me $2,500 to ship this piece to Poland. It was going to hang for 6 months, and it was 112 inches long. And she said, so you don't buy it for a quilt this year? And so I learned that if you want to do it right and you want to treat it as art, you want the receiver to accept it as art. So then I was in Barcelona teaching, and this woman came up to me and said, would you make a quilt for a show in Hungary? We're trying to revive our blue and white textile tradition. So she gave me a packet of 8-inch squares, And I moved it around my studio because it was blue and white. You know, it was just blue and white. I don't do blue and white. But immediately I thought, oh, I'll do an Americana quilt. And so I opened my cupboards to get a piece of fabric out, just do the thing, and I thought, first you go to the post office and you find out what size box is shipped to Hungary, airmail, and what the price would be. So she looked it up on the computer and she told me the size of the box. I went and bought the box and I made the quilt to fit the box. It cost me $12.50. So all these things, I've also been through arbitration on a damaged quilt. I've stood up for women's rights by walking out on the insurance guy and saying, you know, where you can go because I'm not caving in. And it was about a damaged quilt of mine. And so he patted me on the shoulder as he walked out of the room and he said, I think we have a deal. So I went back in and I said to the lawyers, what did he say? And they said, well, a number of things we won't repeat. And so I said, forget it. I'll take him to small claims court. I won't cave. I won't give up the rights of every woman to stand up for what they believe in. So I go out of the room, he comes back in, they call me back in and they say, to the penny, they gave me everything I wanted. So I really feel that I have reached the goals that I've set for myself. And the fact that all of our archives are at the University of Nebraska. All of my 11 years of managing the organization is stored there. So if anybody wants to do any research, it's already there. And my goal in the beginning was to have an executive director in 5 years, which we did. And we did a week-long conference at Aramont School of Arts and Crafts with a traveling exhibition called Diversity. And we did a catalog, and we did everything. So I think I've reached the maximum amount that I could possibly do. And finally, it was time to turn it over to somebody else. And I said, look, sink or swim. I'm not interfering. I'm turning it over. Either you guys make it or you don't make it. It's up to you. I will not interfere. I will be there for you if you need any help, any guidance, anytime you can call me. And I'm very proud of the fact that I did that and I didn't interfere. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I appreciate everybody for coming tonight. And if anybody has any burning questions about anything...
Well, tell us about the piece that's
the piece behind me. My oncologist asked me to do a commission for his office. And I feel very strongly about my life, and I wrote my memoir last year. It's available on YvonnePorcella.com, and it was a great experience. I've written how-to books. I've written 11 books, but this was my life story as a child growing up in California, and so I wanted to do something for him that was a transition, because my interpretation of a person having cancer who's had an amazing life, it's another part of the journey. It's a stop, and it's a chance to look back and reflect on all the wonderful, precious things that have happened in your life. And so I wanted to do something that had a transition to it. So this was the preliminary piece that I did on canvas, and I was going to frame the piece for him. And the piece for him is a little bit bigger, and it's called Illusion. Because when I look in the mirror, I don't see cancer. I mean, I don't have any hair, but I don't see cancer. And thank God I have never had a lot of pain. I've had multiple surgeries. I've had every drug known to man, and I'm still working on new drugs. So I wanted this transition of when you look in the mirror, you see this person, and you see this vast thing ahead of you. What is it? You have no idea what's going to be ahead of you. So there's this peaceful part in the beginning of the piece, and then there's a transition where you have to make that decision in your mind that you're going to accept this gift that you've been given. And so you have to cross over into this river, into this turbulent area that you have no idea what's going to happen. How am I going to feel? Am I going to, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you reach the other side, which is the glory side, where it's acceptance. And you look in the mirror and you say, it's still me. I'm still there. So as I said, this was a preliminary piece, and it's painted on canvas. Anybody have any questions?
Talk about your group.
Oh, I wore this jacket because in 1989 was my year. I was interviewed by Wisconsin Public Television, and I was part of a documentary on American quilt making, and actually went back to public television in Wisconsin, and we filmed the show, and then they wanted to follow me to Houston, and so 1989 was the year I received the Silver Star Award, which was an award given to someone in the industry who had changed the industry in some aspect. And I'm in the Quilters Hall of Fame in Marion, Indiana, because I started the wearable art movement. And that's one of the reasons I'm in there. So when I went to Houston in 1989, I decided I wouldn't make one of my patchwork jackets. I would make a real jacket. So this is a Karl Lagerfeld pattern. And I taught myself haute couture very early on. And I received this award, which was the Silver Star. And I don't wear it very often because it probably weighs about 9 pounds. And it was in honor of my development of the wearable art movement and my the fact that I was in the industry part, the market part, selling books, and also making artwork. So I decided to get it out tonight because in 26 years, a lot's happened in my life, and I'm very grateful for all the joy that you have all brought me. Any more? I've never had problems talking to somebody about anything. Just give me a subject and I'll talk about it. If I don't know the answer, I can make a great story.
Who's your favorite artist?
What?
Who's your favorite artist?
My favorite artist? Oh, I have a lot. Helen Frankenthaler, and for painting, and Charles DeMuth, and Stuart Davis. Anybody else? Well, thank you for coming. Join SAQA. It's a wonderful organization.
Talk to Denise.
Thank you, Yvonne, for being an incredible juror and for coming to the show. We really appreciate everything you've done for us.
We're doing an auction. Are we finished with our auction?
But the benefit auction was hugely successful.
Okay.
I think $66,000. There's still some pieces left in the store.
Okay.
So it's not too late to go to the SAQA website and to
Yes.
purchase one of our auctions.
Invest in art. Invest in art. Your biggest joy will be buying art by your friends and hanging it in your home. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you've all enjoyed the show,